Hello, fifth graders. Today's lesson is on dividing fractions. Now, before we begin, you will need some materials. You'll need a pencil, paper, multiplication or division chart if you need it. So if you need to go retrieve those things, stop the video and start it to continue. Today's I can statement. I can rename numbers using common denominators to solve fraction division problems. In today's lesson, we're going to work on two types of fraction division problems. The first one, we will be dividing a whole number by a unit fraction. And the second problem type, we'll be dividing a unit fraction by a whole number. We're going to practice this using two strategies, a visual strategy and the common denominator strategy. Let's begin by dividing a whole number by a unit fraction. So let's solve 4 divided by 1/3 using the visual strategy. Now, step 1 says represent the dividend with a drawing. Now, just to remind you, in this problem, the 4 is the dividend and 1/3 is the divisor. So we're going to represent the 4 with a drawing. As you see here, I've drawn 4 circles. We're going to divide it into 3 equal parts because our divisor is 1/3. The second step to this strategy is we need to ask ourselves how many divisors are in the dividend, or for this question, how many 1/3 are in 4? When we add them all up, you will see that 4 divided by 1/3 is equal to 12. It's the total number of parts. All right, now let's do the same problem using the common denominator strategy. Now, before we actually begin, I want you to notice that I have rewritten the problem, making the whole number a fraction. So I've taken the 4 and I put it over 1. So now I have 4 over 1 divided by 1/3. Now, the first step in the common denominator strategy, rename numbers with a common denominator. When I look at my denominators, I notice I have a 1 and a 3. So I need to decide, well, what is my common denominator going to be? Since 3 is a multiple of 1, I'm going to choose 3 as my common denominator. That's a good choice because now I do not need to even change the 1/3. I only need to rename 4 over 1. So let's do that. Let's take 4 over 1 and multiply it by a fraction equal to 1. Now, there are many fractions equal to 1, but I want one that's going to help me get a 3 as the denominator. So I'm going to choose 3/3. And 4 over 1 times 3/3 is equal to 12/3. Now, before I move to step 2, I'm going to rewrite the problem. Now, I want you to notice something. You see how I had 4 over 1? I renamed it as 12/3. And my 1/3 is right there. So I just want you to be careful that when you rewrite the problem, choose the equivalent fraction that has the common denominator. Because step 2 of this strategy says divide the numerators. Now we can do that because we have the same denominators. Since both of these are over 3, all I have to do is divide the numerators. So I'm going to say 12 divided by 1 equals 12, and that's the answer. It's the same answer we got when we used the visual strategy. Let's solve another problem. Let's solve 3 divided by 1/5 using the visual strategy. Now, this is a good time to pause the video and attempt to solve the problem on your own. When you're ready, push play to begin. Okay, friends, now let's solve 3 divided by 1/5 using the visual strategy. Step 1, represent the dividend with a drawing. Now again, the dividend in this problem is the 3. So I've drawn 3 circles. And I'm dividing 3 by 1/5, so I divided the circles into fifths. Now, step 2, I have to ask myself, how many 1/5 are in 3? All we have to do is count them up. So the answer to 3 divided by 1/5 is 15. With the visual strategy, you draw it out, you count it, and there's your answer. Let's practice using the common denominator strategy. The same problem, 3 divided by 1/5. This is a good time to pause the video and attempt the problem on your own. Push play when you're ready to work with me. Okay, friends, let's solve 3 divided by 1/5 using the common denominator strategy. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite the problem, making the whole number into a fraction. You see here, I've taken the 3 and I put it over 1. So now I have 3 over 1 divided by 1/5. Step 1 says rename numbers with a common denominator. Well, when I look at the denominators, I see I have a 1 and a 5. 5 is a multiple of 1, so I know I want my common denominator to be 5. This works out great because I already have one fraction with a denominator of 5, so I only have to rename one of the fractions. Let's rename 3 over 1. Now, I have to multiply by a fraction equal to 1, and I want the denominator to be 5. So when I look at the 1, I'm thinking, oh, the fraction equal to 1 that I want is 5 over 5. When I multiply 3 over 1 times 5/5, I get 15/5. Now, before I move to step 2, I'm going to rewrite the problem with the common denominators. If you notice, look how I did that. I took the 3 over 1 and I wrote the equivalent fraction 15/5. And then I took 1/5 and wrote it there. So don't flip them. I'm just saying be careful how you set up your problem. Now, because I have common denominators, I can just go to step 2, which says divide the numerators. Well, that's 15 divided by 1. The answer is 15. What do you notice about these 2 number sentences? Take a look, pause the video, and think about what do you notice about these 2 number sentences. When you're ready, push play to begin. Okay, friends, let me share what I noticed when I look at the 2 number sentences. They both have common denominators for the dividend. They have thirds or fifths. They're both common denominators. The divisors are unit fractions. 1/3, 1/5. Remember, a unit fraction is a fraction with a 1 in the numerator. The quotients are whole numbers. 12, 15. Remember, quotients means answers when you are dividing. The quotient, or answer, can be found by dividing the numerators. In the first number sentence, 12 divided by 1 is 12. In the second number sentence, 15 divided by 1 is 15. That brings us to a shortcut. Friends, number 1, rename numbers with a common denominator. Number 2, divide the numerators. You recognize this as the common denominator strategy. Let's see how that works with the second problem type, dividing a unit fraction by a whole number. Let's solve 1/2 divided by 2. This is a good time to pause the video and attempt to work this problem out on your own using the common denominator shortcut, and push play when you're ready to work with me. Okay, so friends, let's solve 1/2 divided by 2. Now, this is a little bit different because you notice I'm going to keep 1/2, but 2 is a whole number. So I'm going to rename that as 2/1. The divisor is a whole number. Now, I'm ready for step 1, rename numbers with a common denominator. Well, what should my common denominator be? When I look at my denominators, I have a 2 and a 1. 2 is a multiple of 1. I'm going to choose 2 as the common denominator. It works out again because I already have one fraction with a denominator of 2, so let's just rename 2/1. Now, I need to take 2/1 and multiply it by a fraction equal to 1 that's going to give me a 2 in the denominator. I'm going to choose 2/2. When I multiply straight across for the numerators and straight across for the denominators, my equivalent fraction now is 4/2, or 4/2. Before I move to step 2, I'm going to rewrite the problem with common denominators. Now, please pay attention to this because I think this might be an area where students might get confused. When you rewrite the problem, keep the order. The dividend is 1/2. So you're going to name that first down here, 1/2. The divisor was the 2, or the 2/1. So the one we renamed is the divisor. Now, we have common denominators. So all we have to do is divide the numerators. 1 divided by 4 equals 1/4. And that's the answer. All right, friends. Now it's time for a self-assessment. Think and be honest. Can I rename numbers using common denominators to solve fraction division problems? Now think about that, friends, because there's more than one way to divide fractions. In order to hit today's target, you need to be able to say that, yes, I can rename numbers using common denominators to solve fraction division problems. Now, if that answer is yes, you may begin to work on your practice problems. No? Then I want you to rewatch the video or contact your teacher for assistance.